Expand your vocabulary with our core 2,000 words ebook. It's free and packed with essential expressions that you'll use on a daily basis. Start building your vocabulary today. Click the link in the description below to download your free English ebook before it's gone.
Welcome to EnglishClass101.com's British English in 3 minutes, the fastest, easiest and most fun way to learn English. Hi, I'm Gina. Nice to meet you. In this series, we're going to learn some easy ways to ask and answer common questions in English. It's really useful and it only takes 3 minutes. In this lesson, you're going to learn new, more common ways to ask and answer the question, "How are you?" in English. You've probably learned "How are you?" and "I'm fine" in textbooks before. But in the United Kingdom, people will usually ask this question and answer it in a different way. First, let's review. If someone says, "How are you?" you can say, "I'm fine, thanks." I'm fine, thanks. Here are some other ways to answer. I'm good, thanks. This means about the same as I'm fine, thanks. I'm good, thanks. We also have not too bad. You can use this if you are feeling just okay or so-so. Not too bad. Let's look at our question again. How are you? This is the most well-known way of asking how someone is. You could use it when you want to be polite. But now, let's look at some different ways to ask how someone is. These ways are more casual and much more common. First, hi, how are you doing? Hi, how are you doing? Or, hey, how's it going? Hey, how's it going? Or, in an especially casual situation, you could say, you all right? You all right? What if you're not doing all right? Although it's the British way to say you're doing fine even if you're not, if you feel comfortable with the other person, you could also choose to tell them when you're not doing fine. You could say, not so good. Not so good. Not great. Not great. Or, I've been better. I've been better. Be careful. If you say one of these, the other person will usually ask, why? What's wrong? Then you will have to explain. However, if you're feeling particularly well, you could answer more enthusiastically. Fantastic. Fan-ta-stick. Fabulous. Fab-you-lous. Or even, I'm very well indeed. I'm very well indeed. Now it's time for Gina's tips. Because of the popularity and influence of American film and media, some American phrases have become common in the United Kingdom as well. How are you doing was originally an American phrase, but these days you can hear it on either side of the pond. Do you know the difference between what do you do and what are you doing? It's a little tricky, but I'll explain it simply in the next British English in 3 minutes lesson. See you next time!
Welcome to EnglishClass101.com's English in 3 minutes, the fastest, easiest, and most fun way to learn English. Hi, how's it going?
I'm Alicia. Nice to meet you. In this series, we're going to learn some easy ways to ask and answer common questions in English. It's really useful and it only takes 3 minutes. In this lesson, you're going to learn new, more common ways to ask and answer the question, "How are you?" in English. You've probably learned, "How are you?" and "I'm fine" in textbooks before, but in the United States, people will usually ask this question and answer it in a different way. First, let's review. If someone says, "How are you?" you can say, "I'm fine." I'm fine. Here are some other ways to answer. Pretty good. This means about the same thing as "I'm fine." Pretty good. We also have not bad. You can use this if you are feeling just okay or so-so. Not bad. Let's look at our question again. How are you? This is the most well-known way of asking how someone is. You could use it when you want to be polite. But now, let's look at some different ways to ask how someone is. These ways are more casual and much more common. First, hey, how's it going? Hey, how's it going? You can answer this in many ways. If you're feeling good, you can say, good. Good. Pretty good. Pretty good. Not bad. Not bad. Once more, good. Pretty good. Not bad. Here's a tip. Even though these answers mean the same thing as "I'm fine," you can't answer "How's it going?" with "I'm fine." It will sound a bit strange. If you're not feeling good, you can say "Not so good." Not so good. Not great. Not great. Or not so well. Not so well. Be careful. If you say one of these, the other person will usually ask, "Why? What's wrong?" to be polite. Then you will have to explain. Another casual but very common version of "How are you?" is "What's up?" What's up? To reply, use a cheerful voice as you say, "Not much," "Not much," or "Nothing much," "Nothing much." This means you're free and able to chat. Since "What's up?" is just another way of saying hello, you can also reply with "Hey" or "Hi." Now it's time for Alicia's advice. A lot of the time, when we ask questions that mean, "How are you?" in English, we're not actually asking about the other person's health. We're only asking to be polite. You should think of these questions as another way of saying hello, a way for the conversation to get started, instead of actual, literal questions. In fact, when someone asks you, "What's up?" you don't even have to answer. Just say, "What's up?" in reply. Do you know the difference between "What do you do?" and "What are you doing?" It's a little tricky, but we'll explain it simply in the next English in 3 minutes lesson. See you next time.
Hi everybody, welcome back to Ask Alicia, the weekly series where you ask me questions and I answer them. Maybe. Let's get to your first question this week. First question this week comes from Kandan. Hi Kandan. Kandan asks, what are the differences between ask, ask to, ask for, and ask about? Okay, this is a big question, so let's break this into parts. On the most basic level, to ask means to request information, right? You want to get information from somebody else. We can also use it to get favors as well, like making requests for actions and so on. So we're going to get into this. But basically, to ask means you want to get something, information or an action from someone or something else, right? Okay, so with this in our mind, let's take a look at the other examples that you mentioned. The first one, which I want to change, is ask to. So we do not use ask to. You need to use something after ask. We use to after ask when we use a person after the word ask. So for example, ask you to, or ask my mom to, ask my friend to. And we follow this with a verb. We use this pattern when we want to ask someone to do an action for us. Like, I want to ask you to check my homework, or I asked my mom to move the car. So we do this when we are asking someone, so we want to get something from someone, we are asking someone for an action. So we cannot say ask to. This is incorrect. Remove that from your vocabulary. Ask someone to is the correct way to use this. So ask someone to, infinitive verb. Ask someone to move. Ask someone to check. Ask someone to go, and so on. So this is how we use ask something to, or ask someone to. Okay, so let's continue to the second example you mentioned, ask for. So we use ask for when we want to get something from someone else. So for example, you might ask for the menu at a restaurant, or you might ask for someone's agreement in a debate or a discussion style situation. So when we ask for something, we want to get that thing. I asked for the menu. I asked for help, and so on. So as you can see from these examples, we follow ask for with a noun. So ask for means you want to get that thing. So very different from ask someone to, right? Okay, so with this in mind, let's go to the last one that you mentioned, which was ask about. We use this before a topic of conversation. For example, I want to ask about the meeting, or I want to ask about the contract. I want to ask about topic. So we use this when we want to begin a discussion about something, or maybe you want to do some kind of check-in at work or at school. I want to ask about topic of conversation. So when you use this ask about pattern, you're going to follow it with a noun phrase as your topic of discussion. This might be a very long phrase, but it's a noun phrase. So for example, I want to ask about the company's recent dress code policy changes. That's a noun phrase, right? So you'll follow this with a topic, and the topic is a noun phrase, something for discussion. So to summarize, to ask, the most basic form, means to request something from someone. That could be an action or an object. To ask someone to do something means to request an action from someone. To ask for something means you want to receive a physical object. And to ask about something means you want to get information about a certain topic. You are looking to receive information about a certain topic. So this is a very quick breakdown of all the different ways that we can use ask. So I hope that this answers your question. Thanks very much for sending it along. Okay, let's move on to your next question. Next question comes from Salahuddin Khan. I hope I said that correctly. Hi, Salahuddin. Salahuddin says, hello, Alicia. Is the contracted form of and an? Interesting question. So in written English, you put here in your question, an apostrophe. The answer to that is no. So we do not have an official, written contracted form of and. We don't say an apostrophe or anything like that. However, when we are speaking, it often sounds like we contract the word and it often, in American English, sounds like n, like we just drop the d, and sometimes it sounds like we drop the at the beginning of and as well. So for example, if you're at a restaurant and you hear somebody ordering very quickly, they might say, I'd like to get a cheeseburger and a milkshake. So in that sentence, we didn't clearly say and a milkshake, right? A cheeseburger and a milkshake. It sounds very stiff when we say it like this. Instead, the speaker said, I'd like to get a cheeseburger and a milkshake. In that sentence, it's an n, a very, very short n that connects the two. So no, we do not write n, just the n, when we are, writing text messages to our friends or in emails to people. But in speech, we do use this n a lot in place of and. Of course you can say and. I'd like to get a cheeseburger and a milkshake, please. That's also totally fine. It's totally normal to use and. But I will say that when we're speaking quickly, it tends to sound much more natural if we use this n to connect words with and. So I hope that this answers your question. Officially, there's no contracted form like you mentioned, a, n apostrophe, but when we are speaking quickly, we often use n instead of and. Okay, let's move on to your next question. Next question comes from Evgeny. Hi, Evgeny. I hope I said your name correctly. Evgeny asked, what are the differences between spend money and waste money? Okay, nice question. Yeah. First, I want to look at waste money. So waste is kind of the key word here. When you think about the word waste, you might think about trash or garbage, right? Like a garbage can or a wastebasket, something like that, right? This is the image you can keep in your mind when you hear the expression waste money. It's like putting your money in the trash can or putting your money in the wastebasket. So in other words, you use your money for something that is useless, or you use your money for something that you don't get anything from. So maybe you give somebody money for a business investment, but they just run away and they take your money. You could say, oh, wow, I wasted my money, right? So it's like you threw your money into the trash in that situation. So we use waste money when we want to talk about something that we didn't receive any benefit from, right? So the idea of waste is the key here. To spend money, on the other hand, doesn't have this feeling of throwing money into the trash. We can spend money in many different ways. It's like the most neutral way to talk about using your money for something. You can spend your money at a restaurant. You can spend money on food. You can spend money on clothes, whatever. Sometimes we spend our money on something and then later we feel, oh, actually, I wasted my money. So sometimes our opinion of how we used our money can change after we use the money. As in my earlier example, if you think, okay, I'm going to spend $1,000 on this investment. I'm going to use $1,000 for this investment. I spent $1,000 this month on this investment. And then later you realize the person ran away with your money. You can then say, oh, I wasted money on that investment. So you might say spend at the beginning when you use your money, and you might change to waste afterwards. So this really depends on how you feel about the way you used your money, maybe after you get the benefit or after something bad happens, yeah? So this is the key difference between waste money and spend money. Spend money just means to use it in some kind of way. To waste it means to throw it away, like in the garbage can. So I hope that this answers your question about the differences between these two expressions. Thanks very much for sending it along. Okay, that is everything that I have for this week. Thank you, as always, for sending your questions. Remember, you can send them to me at englishclass101.com/ask-Alicia. There's also a link for this in the YouTube description, so please, please, please make sure to send your questions there. Don't put them in YouTube comments or Facebook comments or Instagram DMs. There are way too many every day. I probably won't see it. So please make sure to send it to the official question submission page. Also, please make sure to visit us at englishclass101.com for some other things that can help you with your English studies. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Thanks very much for watching this episode of Ask Alicia, and I will see you again next time. Bye! Want to master grammar so you can speak properly, express yourself better, and understand more? In this video, I'll show you how to master grammar with our lessons and learning program. Let's begin. Number 1, listen to the lesson conversations and explanations. In every lesson, you learn a conversation. Then, our teachers break down every word and grammar rule. So you're actually learning grammar rules in the context of conversations, and you can easily see how they're used. Once you're done, review the conversation again and again to remember what you've learned. Number 2, read the bonus explanations and tutorials. With the lesson notes, you get extra grammar explanations and examples that are not presented in the lesson. After you're done with the lesson, read the lesson notes for extra review. You can even save them as PDFs so that you can access them anytime. Number 3, leave a comment on the lesson. Once you've learned a grammar point, be sure to use it. Leave a comment in the comments section. Write some example sentences for practice. Our teachers will review your comment and give you feedback. Number 4, unlock even more grammar lessons. If you want to find all of the grammar lessons available, visit our lesson library. Under Category, choose Grammar. You'll get all of the pathways and lessons dedicated to helping you learn and master sentence patterns and grammar points. So, if you're ready to finally learn a new language the fast, fun, and easy way, Sign up for your free lifetime account by clicking on the link in the description. Signing up takes less than 30 seconds, and you'll start speaking from your very first lesson. If you enjoyed these tips, hit the like button, share it with anyone who's trying to learn a new language, and subscribe to our channel. We release new videos every week. I'll see you next time. Bye!
Welcome to EnglishClass101.com's British English in 3 minutes, the fastest, easiest and most fun way to learn English. Hey everyone, I'm Gina. In this series, we're going to learn some easy ways to ask and answer common questions in English. It's really useful, and it only takes 3 minutes. In this lesson, you're going to learn how to ask what someone's job is in natural English. Of course, you can just say, "What is your job?" This is correct English, but it sounds too direct and awkward. Native English speakers almost never say this in a social situation. Instead, they use a different question. But before we master that, we need to compare it to a very similar question. What are you doing? I'm presenting a video about English. What do you do? I'm an English teacher. Do you see the difference? These two questions, what are you doing and what do you do, sound similar but mean different things. The first one is asking what you are doing right now, this minute. You answer it using an ing verb. What are you doing? I'm reading. I'm watching TV. While the second is actually a shortened version of what do you do for a living? This is how we ask what is your job in natural English. Let's practice this question. What do you do? What do you do? When native speakers of English ask this question, it can come out very fast and sound more like, what do you do? In order to tell it apart from what are you doing, just listen for the ing sound on the end of the question. If it's not there, then you're being asked what your job is. So, how would you answer this question? Just think of it as if the other person is asking you, what is your job? You could answer with I'm, and then your job. I'm a teacher. I'm a teacher. Or, I'm an engineer. I'm an engineer. If you want to learn more job names, go to EnglishClass101.com and check out the core word lists. These cover job vocabulary and more, and include a picture and audio to help perfect your pronunciation. You can also mention the place that you work at, starting with I work at. I work at a hospital. I work at a hospital. I work at a law firm. I work at a law firm. If you work for a big company that is well known, you can say, I work for, and then the name. I work for Barclays Bank. I work for Barclays Bank. I work for the BBC. I work for the BBC. Now it's time for Gina's tips. When you ask the question, what do you do, and the other person tells you their job, it's polite to make some kind of positive comment about his or her job. For example, how interesting, or that must be exciting, or even, oh really? Remember to sound sincere. Do you know how native English speakers ask each other what their hobbies are? Here's a hint. We don't use the word hobby. Find out next time in the third English in 3 minutes lesson. See you then!
Hi everybody, welcome back to Ask Alicia, the weekly series where you ask me questions and I answer them. Maybe. Let's get to your first question this week. First question this week comes from Zara. Hi Zara, I hope I said your name correctly. Zara asked, Hi Alicia, I'm wondering which one is correct to use. A, I have worked abroad for 2 years. B, I worked abroad for 2 years. Thanks for your lessons. I appreciate your work. Okay, your question is, which is correct to use? So first I'll answer, both of these sentences are grammatically correct, but they communicate different things. So let's do a little bit of grammar review with these two example sentences that you have kindly provided us with. So let's take a look at A first. I have worked abroad for 2 years. This means you are still working abroad. I have worked abroad for 2 years sounds like you are still in the process of working abroad. A different way to say this is, I have been working abroad for 2 years. This is one of the situations in which it's okay to use that progressive form, have been working, or not. You can choose, and we can understand the same meaning, regardless of use of that progressive form or not. So if you say, I have worked abroad for 2 years, it sounds like that's something that you're still doing. So the other situation in which you might see this grammar used is in, say, a job interview situation. If they ask about your work experience or your life experience, you might say something like, oh yes, I have worked abroad, to show that you have life experience. But in this situation, you wouldn't use for 2 years. Generally, we don't assign like a length of time to that kind of experience. Generally, when we want to express just that we've had the experience of doing something, like, oh, I have eaten that before, oh, I've been there before, we usually don't put a time with that experience. Usually that's in a follow-up question. So you might use just the beginning part of your example sentence, I have worked abroad, in a job interview situation, and that would be correct. So to sum up my response to example sentence A, I have worked abroad for 2 years sounds like you still work abroad. It's one way to express that. So let's compare this to example sentence B, I worked abroad for 2 years. This uses simple past tense, right? I worked abroad. This shows us that the action is done. You are finished with your work abroad experience, right? So you would use this after you come back to your home country and you tell people, oh, I worked abroad for 2 years. So it shows us it's done, it's over, this is part of the past, and it's no longer something I'm doing. You could also use this example sentence in a job interview to show that this was an experience you had in the past. It doesn't have quite that feel of life experience that I have worked abroad has, but just I worked abroad for 2 years can use that for 2 years part at the end of the sentence to express how long you did that action, that finished action. So I hope that this helps you understand the differences between these two grammar points. And again, I want to make it very clear, both of the sentences that you mentioned at the beginning are 100% correct. They just communicate two different things. The first sentence communicates that thing is continuing, and the second sentence communicates that thing has finished. So I hope this answers your question. Thanks very much for sending it along. And if you want, you can take a look at some present perfect tense example videos and tons of live streams and more, all on the YouTube channel. So check that out. Just do a quick search for present perfect tense for more about this topic. Okay, great. Let's move on to your next question. Next question comes from Joelle. Hi, Joelle. Joelle says, hi, Alicia. Could you please explain the difference between harm and damage? Thanks so much. Okay, cool. So harm and damage, let's talk about these as verbs first. So both harm and damage can be used as verbs and as nouns, but I want to start by looking at the differences between these two words as verbs. Let's first talk about damage as a verb. So we can damage people and we can damage objects. So when we damage objects, for example, it's usually through some kind of physical act, like crushing that thing or hitting that thing. We do something to the object so that we cannot use it correctly, or there's something wrong with it, so wrong with it that it might be dangerous to use correctly. So for example, if you get into a car accident where two cars crash into each other, one car, actually probably both cars, might be damaged and they can no longer run. You can no longer use the car. So maybe the car is bent or parts of the car are broken and so we cannot use them. So to damage something else means to cause some kind of change in that thing that makes it unsafe to use or makes it maybe look really, really ugly. So to damage can be used in this way to talk about objects, of course. We can also use damage to talk about people, but when we use damage to talk about people, we sometimes use it to mean emotional damage. So that means we say something to someone else that causes them to change in some way, that causes them to feel hurt or to feel unhappy. And so we can call that emotional damage. So I'm using it as the noun here, but as a verb, we might say, oh, those comments really damaged me. So this shows that we can also use this kind of breaking kind of idea with our words to cause someone that emotional pain, right? So this is how we can use damage as a verb. So let's compare this to using harm as a verb. When we use harm as a verb, we typically do not use it to talk about objects. We don't say harming a building or harming a boat or harming a car or something like that. We use to harm to talk about people and perhaps animals as well. So when we harm someone else or when we harm an animal, that refers to causing pain to that person or causing pain to the animal. Like you might see a terrible news report that says that someone harmed a bunch of cats, which sounds like maybe they poisoned them or maybe they did some terrible kind of experiment to the cats. So that means that they caused pain or maybe even killed creatures in some way. But harm means causing pain to another living thing. We don't really use harm with plants very much, I don't feel. We typically use it with people and with animals. So this is the difference with harm and damage as verbs. Now that we know kind of the difference between these as verbs, we can, I think, a little more easily understand the differences between these two words as nouns. So harm refers to like the result of a harmful action, right? So if someone does something that is very painful, or if someone does something like attacking somebody else, you receive harm from that. Like harm is the result of that. So, oh no, like don't do harm to other people is maybe a common expression that you might hear. On the other hand, damage, like we talked about before, can refer to this same sort of thing happening, but to objects. So you might hear, for example, oh, the house took a lot of damage in the storm, or the car took a lot of damage in the accident. So we often use that verb to take damage when we talk about damage as a noun. So you might hear these kinds of differences when you use the noun forms and when you use the verb forms of these words. So kind of a way to sum this up nicely is that we tend to use damage when we talk about objects, and we can also use it to talk about people, usually with our emotions. Harm, on the other hand, is used to talk about people and animals, living things, in other words. So I hope that this helps you understand the differences between harm and damage as nouns and as verbs. And of course, if you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to let me know. Thanks for sending this interesting question along. Okay, let's move on to your next question. Next question comes from Roman Matovsky. Hi, Roman. Roman says, what's the difference between solitary, single, and lonely? Okay, good question. So let's start with solitary because it's maybe the least used of these words. So solitary generally means just one of something, and it can have a kind of negative kind of feel behind it sometimes. So we don't use solitary a whole lot unless we really want to emphasize that it's just one person or just one thing. So a great example of this that's kind of a little bit dark is like in the US judicial system, in the prison system, we have something called solitary confinement, which means one person in a small place for a very long time as part of punishment. So it's a type of jail. So solitary there is used to show it is just one person, just one cell, all by themselves kept inside. So that's what confinement means. You cannot move outside that space. So solitary there communicates that it is just one person. We really have that feeling of it just being one person in this case. You might hear solitary also used in times when maybe a storyteller or a writer wants to emphasize that really there's just one of something. They might say something like, there was a solitary person on the beach, which really sounds like, oh wow, there's really nobody else, just one person there. So if you really want to emphasize the just one of something, you can use solitary to do that. So with this in mind, let's move on to single. So single has a couple different uses. First, we use single a lot to talk about someone who is not married or not in a relationship. We can say he is single or she is single, which means they don't have a partner or they are unmarried. So single is used in this way. We can also use single to mean one of something, but it doesn't have this same feeling of just one, like emphasis on just one, that solitary does. So if you want to order something at a restaurant, you might say, can I get like a single serving of fries, please? Which means I just want one of that thing. It doesn't sound as serious as solitary. So we use solitary when we're usually talking about like people, maybe kind of like some kind of artistic or natural sort of thing. But when we use single, like I want a single serving of that, we use it just to mean one of that thing without kind of the heavy feeling that solitary has. So these are the two uses of single. Lastly then, let's talk about lonely. So lonely is an emotion. So when we feel lonely, we feel like we want to have some kind of social engagement. We want to talk to our friends, we want to see somebody, but nobody is around at that time. And very common human emotion, right? So when we want to express that feeling, we can say, I feel lonely. You would use this grammatically the same way you would any other emotion word, like I feel happy, or I feel sad, or I feel angry, right? I feel lonely. So we would not use, for example, solitary or single in this way. So we cannot use those as emotion words because they are not emotion words. Lonely, however, is an emotional experience. I feel lonely, or he seems lonely, she's been lonely lately. So these communicate an emotional experience. They are completely different from solitary and single, which mean just one of something. So these are the differences between solitary and single and lonely. A quick introduction to these. I hope this answers your question. Thanks so much for sending it along. All right, that is everything that I have for this week. So thank you as always for sending your great questions. Remember, you can send them to me at englishclass101.com/ask-Alicia. Also, the link for this is in the YouTube description. So please make sure to send your questions to that official question submission page. Don't put them in Instagram DMs or in YouTube or Facebook comments. There are way too many and I cannot see them all. So please send it to the official question submission page. I will definitely read your question and I might choose to include it in the series. So thanks so much for watching this week's lesson. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Also, come check us out at englishclass101.com for some other things that can help you with your English studies. Thanks very much for watching this week's episode of Ask Alicia, and I will see you again next time. Bye!
Welcome to EnglishClass101.com's English in 3 minutes, the fastest, easiest, and most fun way to learn English. Hey everyone, I'm Alicia. In this series, we're going to learn some easy ways to ask and answer common questions in English. It's really useful and it only takes 3 minutes. In this lesson, you're going to learn how to ask what someone's job is in natural English. Of course, you can just say, "What is your job?" This is correct English, but it sounds too direct and awkward. Native English speakers almost never say this in a social situation. Instead, they use a different question. But before we master that, we need to compare it to a very similar question. What are you doing? I'm presenting a video about English. What do you do? I'm an English teacher. Do you see the difference? These two questions, what are you doing and what do you do, sound similar but mean different things. The first one is asking what you are doing right now, this minute. You answer it using an ing verb. What are you doing? I'm reading. I'm watching TV. While the second is actually a shortened version of what do you do for a living? This is how we ask, what is your job? in natural English. Let's practice this question. What do you do? What do you do? When native speakers of English ask this question, it can come out very fast and sound more like, what do you do? In order to tell it apart from, what are you doing? Just listen for the ing sound on the end of the question. If it's not there, then you're being asked what your job is. So how would you answer this question? Just think of it as if the other person is asking you, what is your job? You could answer with, I am, plus your job. I'm a teacher. I'm a teacher. Or, I'm an engineer. If you want to learn more job names, go to EnglishClass101.com and check out the core word lists. These cover job vocabulary and more, and include a picture and audio to help you perfect your pronunciation. You can also mention the place that you work at, starting with, I work at. I work at a hospital. I work at a hospital. I work at a law firm. I work at a law firm. If you work for a big company that is well known, you can say, I work for, and then the name. I work for Microsoft. I work for Microsoft. I work for the New York Times. I work for the New York Times. Now it's time for Alicia's advice. When you ask the question, what do you do? And the other person tells you their job, it's polite to make some kind of positive comment about his or her job. For example, how interesting, or that must be exciting, or even, oh, really? Remember to sound sincere. Do you know how native English speakers ask each other what their hobbies are? Hint, we don't use the word hobbies. Find out next time in the third English in 3 minutes lesson. See you next time.
Expand your vocabulary with our core 2,000 words ebook. It's free and packed with essential expressions that you'll use on a daily basis. Start building your vocabulary today. Click the link in the description below to download your free English ebook before it's gone.